Yes.
You're online, please start. Hello, everybody. So welcome you to our Startup Leaders Club today, online panel discussion by inspirational leaders of innovation and drivers of change. And today we're discussing business model, opportunities, disruptions, pivots in the era of pandemic, series 9, disrupting industries, creating new business models and finding new opportunities in crisis. And my name is Nadia Misterova. I'm an independent director of the National Alternative Investment Management Association and advisor to a number of leading GPs in private equity, real estate, venture capital, and hedge funds. And my co-moderator today is Giampaolo Parigi. He's venture capitalist and chairman of a single family office. And we'll start with a brief introduction of the panel today. So Giampaolo, could you start?
Yes, welcome everyone. My name is Giampaolo Parigi. I'm a venture capitalist, private equity specialist, and a former investment banker and chairman of a single family office. I welcome all of you today on this panel, and we have distinguished guests from 4 continents. I would like to start Josh Stein from New York City. Josh, up to you. You're muted. Go ahead, please. Introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. So I'm Josh Stein. I'm the president and co-founder of a company called edtech. edtech is a digital health company that makes adherence devices to help patients take their meds. We're used by many of the largest pharma and pharmacies in the world, and we have users across every major continent. Very happy to be here today. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Thank you, Josh. And Yaron? You're muted.
Hey, I'm Yaron Zakayor, CEO and co-founder of Arti, that takes augmented reality into an affordable, easy to use, and available everywhere, disrupting a market that hasn't been growing that fast and making it available for a significantly larger use case, as you can see today. And of course, you know, that's enabled by the use of cloud-based programming. Thank you very much and happy to be here today.
Very good. Thank you, Yaron. And Sanjay?
Yes, hi.
Please introduce.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I appreciate being invited to the panel. My name is Sanjay Vatsa. I've spent over 30 years in the financial service industry at C-levels, mostly as a disruptor. Right now, focus on disruption in energy, healthcare, and in tech fin using blockchain. We've got a few of these capabilities out. Everything disruption oriented, which I think will work very well in the post-COVID scenarios. I'm also created capital markets in 3 countries, Singapore, India, and United States. So I've been pretty much known on the financial services side, but now making a mark in other disciplines. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Mike, can you introduce yourself?
My name is Mike Omotosho. My friends call me Big Mike, not because of my size, but because of my large heart. I am a serial entrepreneur. I trained first as a pharmacist, and I've been in public health supply chain management for over 25 years. However, today I will be speaking as the president of Hepatitis Zero Nigerian Commission. Hepatitis Zero is a project name for World Hepatitis Eradication Initiative, which is an action group of Rotary International. Rotary International, like you know, is one of the world's foremost humanitarian organizations. Hepatitis Zero is present in 115 countries. We support the United Nations Charter of halting the transmission of hepatitis by the year 2030, as stated in SDG 3.3. So we plan, for instance, to screen and vaccinate 150 million Nigerians before the year 2030.
So thank you so much for your brief introductions, and we'll start with first questions. Actually, Aaron, could you let us know about what's new in your businesses? So what inspired you to start up this particular technology, and what is new what are challenges, trends, opportunities you're currently observing?
Excellent, definitely. The reason we created this business is because some of my co-founders have been in the augmented reality space for 10 years or so. And what they saw is that all of their customers, they have a creative house, and they saw that all of their customers are asking them for augmented reality. But when they hear about the price, most of them kind of turn back. So while everyone wants to use AR in broadcasting and media, a very few set of people are actually using it. So they turned to me and said, hey, Yaron, they know that I'm a serial entrepreneur. Can you create this affordable, easy to use and available everywhere solution? And that's why we've chosen to create Audi. The challenges and the opportunities that we see today are very interesting. So let's start from the opportunities. Right now, most of us are not meeting face-to-face. So the business is changing. And if 6 months ago, it wasn't clear that broadcasting and the digital media will need to operate in a situation where you cannot be in meetings on a day-to-day basis, that is now clear. We need to be able to function, and broadcasters are functioning in a broadcast from home situation. So the awareness that a solution like ours is needed is very clear here. On the other side, the challenges are there, of course. Business is not moving fast in terms of closing deals, because everyone is unaware of how the future of the economy is going to move forward. So there are very positive things, and of course there is a balance of challenges that we need to overcome. And of course, not being able to meet people face to face and close business is of course a challenge that I assume most people are seeing.
Thank you so much, Yaron. And Josh, would you also introduce your own initiative, and why do you think it's important, and what would be the trends supporting your industry in the current environment?
Yeah, absolutely. So really the value and service that we provide, like our solution is always sponsored by the healthcare company, meaning the healthcare company pays edtech for our service, and it's always free for patients. The reason why healthcare companies sponsor these programs for patients is because the service that edtech delivers to patients helps patients take their medication as prescribed, which of course improves healthcare outcomes for these patients. So one of the really neat things about what we do is, not only are we a business that generates value, we are able to deliver value to the end user, the patient, and make sure they have better health outcomes without them paying a penny for any of this service. The reason why these healthcare companies sponsor this program is because when patients have better health outcomes, it basically reduces cost and interventions that are required all across the healthcare ecosystem. So as I mentioned before, we create Internet of Things devices, a smart pill bottle mostly, that help patients take their meds. And obviously there's a huge back-end software component. In terms of the trends that we're seeing in the industry now, obviously we're in the midst of a worldwide pandemic. And one of the really neat things that edtech has been able to do, especially during this pandemic, but also before, is our remote monitoring technology allows patients to keep their connection to healthcare providers without having to step into a doctor's office or hospital. So, the Internet of Things in healthcare, especially recently, within these past few months, has just exploded in growth. So we're very fortunate to ride a really powerful wave that is, helping patients and also reducing any risks of them going into doctors' offices or hospitals during this unprecedented time.
Thank you very much, Josh. And I'd like to say one moment on you. As conventional wisdom has it, at least recently, MBA graduates don't make for very good startup entrepreneurs, but you're the living proof to the contrary. Can I ask you, whatever possessed you in the beginning to come up with such a smart idea?
Yeah, absolutely. So both of my parents are in healthcare. My dad is a doctor. My mom's an occupational therapist. So I've been around healthcare in one way or another my entire life. Before I founded edtech, which I founded when I was getting my MBA at Wharton, I worked for a number of different tech companies. So my background before edtech was tech, not healthcare. But in the past 10 years or so, it's been all healthcare because of edtech. But what pushed me to found this company was, I was speaking with my dad one day about what are the biggest problems in healthcare. And he opened my eyes to the issue of medication non-adherence, which is basically the technical term for patients not taking their medication on time. When patients don't take their meds, it's worse for patients, obviously, but it's worse for the healthcare ecosystem at large because costs increase across the board. In the US alone, $300 billion with a B of increased costs each year are attributed to medication non-adherence. So at the time I said, hey, this is an enormous problem. What would be really neat is if we could create a pill bottle that would just beep if it was time for you to take your meds. That was the original concept, really simple. But thankfully, I was able to find two co-founders who are both brilliant engineers. And when we got together in the early 2010s, we said, this Internet of Things trend is in its infancy, but we think there's a lot of potential there. So why don't we not just stop at a pill bottle that can beep? Let's put some intelligence into it, make it a little computer that could send data wirelessly, analyze that data, send smart interventions to patients, integrate with healthcare software, et cetera. So that's really what we've built. It's been really, really successful to date, thankfully. But yeah, the initial concept was driven by my parents, but thankfully my really brilliant engineering co-founders are what got us to where we are today.
And if I can add to that, Josh, this is tremendous because as we have deployed our integrated healthcare, because we have been able to pass the bills in Ontario and in Nova Scotia. So we are delivering that. One of the biggest things, and we have acquired 11 clinics. One of the biggest problems we face is a non-adherence to medicine. It's almost like you have to send someone over home so that they can have it. We were trying to see if we can put a tracker at the pill level or something like that, or put packets together and saying, these are the 5 things, you open it, you take all the 5 tablets. You don't have to have 5 bottles. So we'd like to know more, but I think what you're doing is what's going to get us to save significant amount of cost, both in Americas and anywhere in the world. It's also non-compliance in, most of the 80% of the people who are heart patients die between 2 visits. Why? Because they're not taking the medicines.
Absolutely.
That's the problem.
It's a worldwide problem. And thankfully, I mean, we have customers all across the globe. And one other thing that's really important for a growth stage healthcare company to do is to have published data from third parties, either peer-reviewed journals or healthcare customers that use you to validate this. Because anybody could say, hey, our solution actually helps patients, but having published data to support that is especially important. So I do invite all folks to go to our website. Under the evidence tab, you can see all the published data from some of the largest healthcare companies in the world, peer-reviewed journals, et cetera. But yeah, like you said, it's a worldwide problem, and helping patients is really what motivates us each and every day.
Got it. Very nice.
Thank you, Josh. And Mike, would you let us know about your initiative? What's vital in it, and why, as a serial entrepreneur, you decided to focus on that this moment?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Nadia. Well, first, let me start by explaining what our strategy is. Even though it's a charity, we try to operate like a business model, so we don't have to go cap in hand begging to be able to provide the services that we're providing. Now, the situation is this. We do have about 27 million Nigerians walking around with the hepatitis virus. And to make matters worse, maybe just about 5 million of us know their status, meaning we have about 22 million people walking around who do not know their status, and they keep on infecting others. So before you know it, the numbers will increase exponentially. However, there is a trick. Hepatitis B actually has a vaccination to help prevent one from having the virus if you've not gotten it. While C does not have a vaccine, but it has a cure. Now, the sad part is that the B that doesn't have a cure, but has a vaccine, can be treated. So once you can prevent yourself from contracting the virus, then you're home and dry. So the concept is to actually work with people, create awareness, get people talking, get them screened, and then get them vaccinated. if they're positive, they don't have to be vaccinated, then they will have to be treated. Now it's a lifelong treatment for B. The objective is to focus on how we can get as many people as possible. We're in a country where about 80% of the people live on less than $2 a day. So how do you get them to get vaccination at $24? It's actually about $8 per dose, and it's 3 doses. So what we do is to work with well-meaning individuals, high net worth persons, corporate organizations, and then encourage them to support us. That way we can subsidize the price of the vaccines and make it available at about $2, at most $2.5. The bulk of the challenges that we're facing now with the COVID era is that the Naira in Nigeria has been devalued by about 35%. That means the cost of the screening kits has gone up. The cost of vaccines have gone up. Even local logistics is a lot more expensive. The second major problem that we have, I'll call it a challenge really, is we will appear insensitive if we'll have to go to our donors and continue to request for support at such a time like this, when everybody is busy talking about the downturn in the economic situation and co. But the third major problem that we're facing is that more and more people are concerned about COVID. People want to see what is going to happen to them, what does the future hold, and nobody even wants to care about hepatitis or other ailments.
Thank you, Mike. And Aaron, what would be the most recurrent requests from your clients in terms of usage of augmented reality? And what type of requests you're primarily getting?
Of course, I need to unmute. So we're getting, we're right now focusing, and this is actually a very important lesson that I encourage all entrepreneurs to learn, all startup entrepreneurs to learn. Our product is available to serve many markets, or is capable actually to serve many markets. But as an early stage startup, you need to focus on one product and one market. And therefore we are focusing on the media video market, meaning broadcasters, newspapers, and online video media producers. So that's our focus in terms of the target market. And in that market, mostly we're getting requests to serve people in situations that they cannot use augmented reality today. As an example, a big broadcaster that has a very large investment in their main studio has asked us to help them in providing augmented reality for broadcasting from home and from broadcasting from their remote offices, because of course right now they need to provide services not just from their main office. Now, in terms of the additional use cases that we're seeing, of course, now people want to use augmented reality or want to introduce very sophisticated graphics in scenarios that are beyond the standard broadcasting. It's of course in doing live streaming, such as we're doing today, and in sharing videos recorded offline in YouTube or in Facebook Live, in YouTube, not in Facebook, and enabling fast turnaround of adding graphics.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Aaron. Sanjay, what is the product or say consulting product that you are finding to be the hot selling item in this period in your firm?
So it's not a consulting product. We don't do consulting much, but the products that are really selling and that got really a lot of legs, 2-3 things, right? One is what Yaran just spoke about, right? The augmented reality. In fact, the one developed in Microsoft has been done by my niece. So it's a very interesting thing where people are asking her and saying, can I do training for nurses using augmented reality? And I think they've got the goggles too, so you can actually use that and train up people without really them attending any kind of session. So it's training and education. I think what I'm seeing is on the medical side that I'm an angel investor and a partner at, where we have bought clinics and we are creating the integrated healthcare digital end-to-end with patient being in the middle, not the insurance companies, right? I want to be very careful. Medicine in our countries is where everyone is important other than the patient and the provider. Everyone is important. We are putting them in the middle. What Josh has got is the aspect of remote monitoring, and the aspect of non-adherence to medicine is one of the basic elements that actually you can plug a very big gap. The other two that I'm seeing is that the privatization is the democratization of private assets. How do you allow individuals to invest in private assets and enjoy alpha creation? So this is all blockchain and security token offerings and everything else. The last thing, which is very big now, is the supply chain. So World Economic Forum came out with a session saying that post-COVID, to go to pre-COVID levels of supply chain, blockchain is the only way to do it. And blockchain, so because now you can't take heaps of paper and get your supply chain finance, you can't do bill of ladings, all those elements have gone away, right? Travel is restricted, everything is restricted. So we have figured out a blockchain-based tokenization platform that plugs the gap of $7 trillion worth of lack of financing today for short-term 90 days credits post-shipment. So I think these are being demanded a lot more. What's also happening is people are getting a lot more productive. See, I think one of the things we don't understand is that I'm also part of the I'm also an advisor to the federal government, unofficial committee that advises Munchin on a daily basis. We sit for 45 minutes. And people are finding out in this environment that there's more collaboration and more ideas being generated, and people are much more productive. So anything that allows people to collaborate without being physically seeing each other, I don't think you can take away the connections completely away. But I've also seen private equity and venture capital deals closing. So think like Yaron has and everything else will help. So I think the full aspect of blockchain-based capabilities that allows people to trust information and do trade is going to be very big, number one. Number two, remote healthcare is going to be very big. That's, again, we're seeing that a very, very big play in that. Telehealth, overnight, now you get compensated for telehealth, which you could not before, right? Both in Americas and in Canada. So suddenly things have changed, and so even in India, even in Bangladesh. So I think what I'm trying to say is that anything that allows people to collaborate, any technology, and allow to provide services without physical contact will actually flourish. So we've got solutions in each one of them.
Thank you. Nadia, do you want to?
Yeah, thank you, Sanjay and Mike. What would be the role of community which could support your initiative, and why is it so important to have this entrepreneurial background in your initiative, and how can you team up with serial entrepreneurs to support your mission?
Thank you, Nadia. First, one thing is certain, like everybody else, we've been punched in the face. And when you're punched in the face, you've got to wake up and decide what to do. We're not changing our vision. This year, for instance, we're planning and hoping to be able to vaccinate 1 million people. But we're changing our strategy. We're beginning to look at what else we can do to let people see how to come in and support. So we've come up with a lot of strategies, and we're hoping some of those will work. Some of them are actually already working. For instance, we have what we call the Pay Forward. That's a scheme where we've been able to vaccinate about 100,000 people already. So we try and talk to them to see how they can subsidize the vaccination for other people too as well. Because it is very difficult to just go and start asking people for donations. But those that have enjoyed this are able to also support easily. Another thing we've been able to do is to come up with what we call the Zero Heroes. These are people who will commit to just supporting with just $2.50 every month for a minimum of 10 months. So whether they've enjoyed it before or not. Another advantage that we're hoping to cash in on is the opportunity to be able to get social media influencers to come on board and become advocates so that they can speak for us and reach more people. We've also come up with a lot of social media campaigns that is letting people know that it's not all about COVID-19 alone. Hepatitis 2 is a major ailment. Hepatitis is killing people and even killing more people than HIV and malaria and tuberculosis combined. So when people get to see that truly it's not about COVID alone, then the response becomes a little more encouraging. We've also been able to let people know that when they give, it's not about giving money alone, because a lot of companies are struggling to even survive as it is. So getting them to just contribute cash alone is a little tricky. So we encourage them to give if they can give, but if they can't give, we seek alternative ways of getting them to support. For instance, we have an organization that actually gave us hand sanitizers. We package this, and then we're letting the world know that, okay, this is actually from is a corporate social responsibility from this very organization. The essence of all of this is that we give the screenings, we do the screenings free of charge, but we subsidize the vaccination. So what we're doing is looking for ways to get people to support us so that we can continue to subsidize the vaccination. One key area where we've succeeded is talking to a mall in Abuja here. It's called the Jabi Mall, for instance. They actually allow people to use their central atrium for activation every weekend. And people pay $1,200 for 2 days within the weekend. They've been able to give us 3 months free to use that. That's actually like $72,000. You'll agree with me that it's going to be very difficult to get them to give us $72,000, but they're giving us $72,000 worth of value for what we're getting. We also have what we call the social enterprise scheme, where we actually come up with the products like we did with the sanitizer, and we can package this at a premium. So while other sanitizers are probably going for about $10, $15, we're able to let people see that we're selling ours at $20. First is quality, but beyond the quality, they get to see that they're actually donating and contributing to a cause. So they know the profit doesn't come into private pockets, it goes towards that pool of funds, that pocket of envelope that we can use to vaccinate this. Finally, Nadia, one thing that we've been able to do too is to recognize that the world is actually our entire marketplace. We've been working and playing locally in Nigeria alone before. Now we're planning to reach out. In fact, that is how I met you, you remember, so that we can see how we can get global funding to support the cause itself, so we don't just stay local. A few months ago, all of this would have not been possible because business just appeared normal to us. But then things are changing, and we know we need to begin to shift our priorities. We need to begin to accelerate whatever things we can adapt. We need to also evolve our individual behaviors. But the underlying word there for us is actually agility, so that whatever it is that we're doing, we know that we must be agile to be able to respond to the immediate needs. You'll agree with me that this is not new. Almost every 10 years, we have a huge problem like this. In 2008, when we had a problem like this, a lot of companies came up. 10 years ago, nobody knew WhatsApp, nobody knew Instagram, nobody knew Uber, nobody even knew Slack. But today, they're the talk of town because they're companies that were developed as necessities of the time. So what we're doing is looking out for disruptive ways of changing people's action towards giving.
Thank you, Mike. Josh, your business definitely has got a lot of potential to expand horizontally across geography and hopefully also vertically and different sizes of pharma companies. But do you see any possibilities for spin-offs or shootouts anytime soon, just to try and keep leveraging on whatever good you're building?
Yeah, so I'd say right now, our business expansion, we're focusing on 3 distinct areas. So, we're a 40-person company right now, experiencing pretty considerable growth. And the three areas we're focusing on, none are spin-offs, but one is we've captured a nice chunk of the pharmacy market. So we want to expand in that current market quite considerably, just getting more customers. So that's pretty simple, what every business wants to do. That's number one. Number two is one of the really neat things about helping patients take more meds is that every entity in healthcare benefits. If a patient's healthier, needs fewer costly interventions, hospitals are better off because they can better, take care of patients. They don't have to deal with these expensive interventions, and insurance companies similarly are also better off. It's not just pharma companies and pharmacies. So we're expanding our current product offerings to work with mostly just insurance companies, also clinical trials. So I would say that's same product, new markets, because we see a lot of opportunity there. And then the third thing we're thinking about and actively investing in is similar products in both new and existing markets. So right now, our current device is just the bottle itself, but we have this very robust software backend that can power any number of devices, not just the bottles we produce. So we're investing in creating new hardwares that can plug into the existing software backend that we've created, and also seeing if there's other hardware that we may want to integrate with as well. So I would say that's new product development to capture new and existing markets. So those are really the three areas that we're investing a lot of time and resources into.
Thank you very much, Josh. And Yaron, do you see the possibility of expanding manufacturing abroad with your company? Or do you think it's going to be still clustered in Israel as it grows? I mean, of course, Israel is a phenomenal hotbed for technology, but I'm just wondering if you had explored the options.
So first of all, let's separate two things. One is the development of the product. We're actually a full-blown software company. So in terms of you can write software from anywhere in the world. Of course, when the team is small, like our current team, it's better to be in one time zone. Of course, now we're not all working from the office, but initially we were all working from the same office, so there's a lot of advantage to it. In terms of the sales, we're actually, one of the changes that happened because of current times is that we were forced to rely 100% on remote sales. But that's not going to be for the far future or for the mid future. We are planning to have resellers in Europe, in Asia, open an office in the US. So we are going to be expanding in terms of the sales, marketing, customer success teams will be worldwide, starting with the US.
Thank you. Nadia, do you have a question?
Yeah, sure. So Sanjay, would you comment on the fundraising environment currently? So you work with different types of businesses, and especially in blockchain, so there is lots of opportunities. So how would you comment on that?
So people think that fundraising actually has slowed down. It actually has not. I've seen a lot of good closures coming into place. I was just talking to Dusan from TGV4 today. They're raising a $10 million fund. And over the last 3-4 weeks, they've got additional commitments. But again, people are being selected as to what industries and what sectors they want to invest in, right? So if you're going to do it in hospitality and travel, they're having a tougher time to raise funds, almost negligible. But if you're in the healthcare, fintech, blockchain, AI, the future, the not the rear view, but the windscreen technologies, then people are willing to invest. But they're willing to invest only in a business use case that can be brought to life very soon. So that's happening very fast. So fundraising is happening. I also think fundraising is going to change with the tokenization of funds happening. the fundraising is going to become very different, because now instead of going only to the institutional investor and high net worth or ultra high net worth, you can go to the mass affluent and high net worth people and actually raise funds from them at small denomination of $5,000 and $10,000 if a fund can be tokenized. And that is also coming into play and being discussed quite a bit. There's a fund that is being raised out of Australia, and they've approached me whether we could tokenize a $100 million fundraise. Now, if you tokenize it, let's say I'm able to do that and I'm able to get $5,000, $10,000 investments where you don't even have to do a Reg D, an accredited investor kind of a thing. Let's say they can raise a fund, and actually, the same thing can apply to charity also, Mike, right? People are tokenizing the charity raise. So basically, if you can do that, once I've done about 5-10 of these funds, let's say tomorrow someone comes and says, Sanjay, we need to raise a fund. I'll have an investor base of 10,000 people who can invest up to $5,000. You can immediately get in 2-3 days to understand whether there is an opportunity to fund this process, a private company or a fund or not. So I think the full tokenization is going to take away the 220 model, collapse it completely down, bring financial inclusivity of bringing the medium, people to invest in it, and actually make fundraising much more easier rather than very, very expensive. You have to go through massive amount of presentations, raise all those kind of Series A, Series B, Series C, Series D. Now, once you tokenize, you raise your fund as and when you need at the valuation that you are. So again, it will take time, but I've seen no slowdown in the fundraising capability, but it has been slowed down for things like hospitality and sectors that will take a long time to recover.
Thank you, Sanjay. Mike, I have a question for you. You divide yourself between business and philanthropy. How does your normal day look like? How do you, split tasks and organize, the two selves that you have?
Well, thank you. Well, I'm actually a serial entrepreneur. So what I do basically is to come up with my priorities on a daily basis and then schedule those priorities. So what I do on the average, I do have about 6 other businesses that I do, even though I run all of them from the same building, my building, the SHI house. In fact, we also house the charity. So what I do is I try, besides my morning devotionals, then I try to give about an hour each to each of those businesses and see how it goes. For some of them, I don't spend as much as an hour. For some, we'll spend a lot more. And in a funny way, you will notice that they kind of intertwine, because I haven't been trained as a pharmacist in the public health sector. And what we're doing with hepatitis 0 is also public health. It also talks about implementation out there in the field. Don't forget that what I do as a supply chain public health commodity expert is also with implementation. So everything kinds of work together. I give you a clear example. For instance, when I was talking to Nadia, I did explain to her that what we need to do is come up with a project vehicle that will help us build a vaccine farm that will probably cost about between $100 and $120 million, which will be the first of its kind in Africa, because we do have 2 other vaccine manufacturing units in Africa, but none of them is producing enough to be able to deliver what is needed. So the bulk of the vaccines that we're enjoying in Nigeria today, and to a large extent in most parts of Africa, is imported from either India and partly from China. So if we can produce locally, then that's a market for 1.3 billion African people. And there's also the huge opportunity of taking advantage of the African continental free trade zone, which has been signed by 54 African countries. So most of what I do actually are intertwined. So it's not like multitasking, but I find myself jumping from one area into the other on a regular basis.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah.
So, Ron, I have a question to you. So what would you comment on the fundraising environment in your field? So it's quite a popular now, augmented reality. So it's one of the trendy things where investors are looking at. So it's also inspiring lots of digital transformation across different industries. So how would you comment on that? Do you find it easy now in your field, or maybe you will comment on your own plans in terms of fundraising rounds?
So first of all, we closed our seed round of $4 million in March. Now it sounds great, like we closed it, you know, but of course the deal was agreed upon a couple of months before, so you know that could not be associated with current times. I think that there's definitely a slowdown in terms of fundraising. I'm hearing it both from entrepreneurs in general, not just in augmented reality. So I'm hearing entrepreneurs and from my friends in the VC area. And it's of course, you know, you can do less face-to-face meetings, and funding decisions in these days, or, you know, in general, rely a lot about relationships. So when you want to get a significant amount, you need to develop a relationship with your potential investors. And there is a disadvantage of doing it over Zoom in a virtual way. So that has its toll on fundraising that is due to current times. Now, specifically, augmented reality is definitely an area where a lot of investors are looking for opportunities, that there is a lot of traction. And I believe that, you know, as the rumors about Apple's glasses and other vendors are heating up, we're going to see more and more investors in augmented reality, and we're going to see even investments in these, you know, tougher times for entrepreneurs.
Thank you, Yaron. Josh, what type of experience do you have in your pharma companies? Do you see them as responsive to feedback and sometimes even maybe criticism that you can provide, constructive criticism? How do you have this relationship and with your own clients? Can you tell us a little bit what's happening without getting maybe into, of course, confidential details, but you know, what type of mood animates the relationship?
Yeah, absolutely. What I can say is, you know, the pharma companies that we work with, and we work with most of the major pharma companies, have all been wonderful, wonderful partners, and they are extremely passionate about doing what's best for patients. We know that, you know, a lot of folks have very strong opinions about pharma one way or another. The way that I personally look at the industry is there are really two types of companies. There are companies that will invest heavily in creating new medicines and, you know, need to obviously recoup some value once those medicines hit the market, and then constantly reinvest and create new medicines, which ultimately is a net good. Those are the kinds of pharma companies that we work with, and those are the biggest pharma companies in the world. And then there are other pharma companies out there that will, you know, not create new medications and will just sort of boost the price up of existing meds. And those, I don't think, create a net positive. But again, we don't really work with those. The ones we do work with, all reinvest, and they're fantastic, wonderful customers. They're extremely open to any sort of criticism. We have very transparent dialogue with each other. And I, you know, criticism I just mentioned, not because that's a frequent topic, just that was to your question. But we always do try to do what's best for patients, and we're totally able to have very transparent conversations about how to achieve that. We don't have to sort of watch what we say with them, just because at the end of the day, when you have two types of companies that are both so focused on doing what's best for the patient, you're able to sort of see through the fog and focus on really what matters. But we've had only a wonderful experience working with them.
Thank you. Thank you, Josh.
Sanjay, I have a question to you. So what would be your recommendation for startup leaders today, how to attract their early stage financing, and what should be in the focus of their attention?
So be in the right industry. So that's the first thing I would say. If you are to attract investors, I think if you are in the forward-looking capabilities that can add value in this new post-COVID environment, right? You can actually attract investors like anything. Today, people are scrambling to put money into telehealth. right? They're scrambling, and the valuations are going through the roof, right? Anything that builds collaborative tool. We have heard of Yardley, we've heard of Huddle. I'm not sure if you know, Huddle is a competition to Zoom. Again, they're raising funds at a faster pace. But I think to attract investment, first of all, you should have the right idea in the forward-looking capabilities that allows collaboration and business in a post-COVID environment, number one. Number two, you should be able to demonstrate a technology team or something that you can execute and bring it into place in 6 months, not more than that. If it's a year and a half away, you'll miss the boat completely. So that's the second element of it. The third element is my aspect would be to focus on fintech and healthcare. These are the two spaces that are actually very big. And there are some spaces in the telecom side, 5G and everything else that you can invest in. But once you do that, I think those are the two very fair spaces to be in. Because banks are going to banks are getting redundant. I see, I actually did a presentation at the Oxford Business School, and I showed a big whale. And then I showed how lumps of flesh was being taken away from banks, right? Because of fintech companies coming in, right? Taking away revenues, taking away market share. So banks are going to be infrastructure providers in the future. So fintech companies can evolve the products around it, and banks will ultimately become financiers. Basically, that's what's going to become. So to these fintech companies. So I think, I do believe that you have to be in the right industry. And if you're in the hospitality industry, I'm not sure it will actually help right now. But if you're in an industry that allows, like the one we saw last week, which basically Draper House, right? They build about, not only they are in the hospitality industry, but actually they are a network that allows people to collaborate and to raise funds and to collaborate on the ideas. That in itself is a very different business model. So it has to be a unique business model, right industry, and execution capability. These are three elements.
Thank you, Sanjay. Thank you, Sanjay. And Mike, Africa is probably the continent that is most looked at after in terms of technology advancement. There's a number of Western investment funds that are pretty active in many countries, Rwanda being one, for example. From your perspective, what do you see as the next milestones that Africa could pass in terms of technology? You're
Yeah. Thank you, Giampaolo. Well, for Africa, the opportunities are limitless. Like we know, it's a virgin land. Almost everywhere, the technology itself is almost non-existent. So for me, it's virgin land. It's a whole lot of opportunities. I saw what RT was showing, and I was just totally blown. So even for us to have the 4G data as it is, 4G internet service is a problem for most parts of Africa. Not to mention 5G that people are already looking towards. So I see a lot of opportunities coming into Africa. And especially the fact that, I'll need to say this again, with the African Continental Free Trade Zone Agreement, that's a huge opportunity, because then you're not just looking at maybe a Ghanaian market of about 30 million people, or a Nigerian market of about 200 million people. You're actually looking at 1.3 billion people. So that's a market that you can actually assess all in one clean sweep. And that's a huge opportunity that I think a lot of people can go into. And like Sanjay said, if this can be tokenized, I think it will be a nice idea, because that is basically the future. A few people had gotten involved with Bitcoin and the other tokens in the past, and they saw the advantages, and so many others actually felt it was going to crash. But when it didn't crash, they realized, okay, this was here to stay, and the prices skyrocketed. So this is what people love to see. Africans love to actually feel what they're buying, touch it, hold it, and experience it. There's a popular saying in my community: if somebody says he's got headache, and you say, here is a medication that you can use for the headache, the first question he or she is going to ask you is, did you ever have headache? And Did you use it? Did it work for you? So people want experience share. They want to be able to see these things work. So once we have technology that can work, that people can see work, we will truly pay for it in Africa. And we've got the resources to be able to consume and pay for it too as well. So it's a huge opportunity.
I think, can I add to that, Mike, if you don't mind?
Yes, please.
I think Africa is going to leapfrog 2 generations. And I think that's where it is. Look at what's happening on the payment side. It's just amazing. We don't even, our payment system in America is 3 generations behind what's happening in Africa. Right? So Africa is going to be, so if that's the other element that we should not forget. So I think people, when you invest, they're also saying, where is your go-to market, right? And I think that's also another thing. But Mike, well said. Thank you. I thought I'd add to that.
Thank you, Sanjay.
Thank you, Sanjay. And Aaron, I would like to ask you the same question as well. So what would be your advice to serial entrepreneurs and investors in the current environment?
So first of all, to entrepreneurs, yes, it's very important to go after a problem that would be viable in the market. So, that's it would be a bad advice to focus on a problem that no one is looking a solution for. On the other side, as a founder, you really need to be passionate about what you're doing. So don't just follow the trends. All of us know about the hot trends. The challenge with the hot trends is that at some point they peak. And if you follow the hot trends and you go after that, you are at the risk that you're at the peak of that hot trend and it's on its way down. And you've chosen something that you're not passionate about and might go down. That's not going to end up well. However, on the other side, if you're passionate about something, and even if it's in the beginning of the growth cycle as a space, and you're passionate about it, you will find success at the end of the day. So my key advice to entrepreneurs is focus, solve a problem that you really are passionate about. I loved what Josh said about why did he has chosen to co-found his company. He looked at the real problem that needed a real solution. And I'm not sure that 10 years ago, technology and healthcare was such a big thing. There were other big things like security, yet he has chosen a problem that was interesting for him. The same in my case. I've chosen to focus on augmented reality, not because it's a hot space. On the contrary, a lot of my friends told me, you're going after a problem that tons of people tried to solve and did not succeed. But it's a problem that I feel is interesting. So focus on that. For investors, find those entrepreneurs that will sustain and fight through the tougher times. That's the most important criteria.
Thank you, Aaron. And Josh, same question to you. What would be your final address to our audiences, which are serial entrepreneurs and VC investors? What would be your recommendation for today?
Yeah, I guess, for investors, I would like to reiterate the advice we just heard. Invest in people and people that have perseverance and that will see a vision to its fruition. In terms of advice to entrepreneurs themselves, I would say, don't get too concerned or overwhelmed with the macro. Focus more on the micro, meaning oneself, one's company. This is obviously an unprecedented environment that we see right now. Nothing is how really it was a year or so ago. That doesn't mean that your company can't succeed. And even if you're in an industry that isn't necessarily experiencing growth, you can still be in that industry and you still can be successful. You only need yourself to be successful. If you're trying to fundraise, you only need to close a round for your company. You don't have to worry about all companies overall. Same with landing customers, users, etc. So focus on yourself and what matters for your company. Don't let the overall environment or environmental trends push you off of a course that you truly believe is right. So I would say that's my advice.
Thank you, Josh. And Mike, what would be your recommendation to go as a kind of summary of our today's discussion for serial entrepreneurs and VC investors?
Thank you, Nadia. I believe that the business terrain is actually full of a lot of curves. While it may be impossible to know each twist and turn that the future might hold, it is still very possible to hone the skills that one can use to maneuver. And I think part of that skill, key among those skills would be agility, the opportunity, the ability to be able to look into the future and say, yes, this is a change that we must embrace. And like John Maxwell said, that change truly is inevitable, but growth is optional. So if we choose to truly grow, then I think COVID-19 presents that opportunity for us to grow. And the easiest thing to do will be to have a 30, 60, and 90 days priority work plan, come up with team leads, and then begin to walk the talk. And finally, I want to remind all of us that strategy is useless without implementation. Thank you, Nadia.
Thank you, Mike. And Giampaolo, what would be your final address?
Well, for entrepreneurs, definitely I would like to suggest to live every single day of their fiscal year as a balance sheet day. So, and if the solutions and the hurdles that are found, addressed, and resolved in any given day are met with properly, the combined summatory of all these individual days is what makes a successful balance sheet at the end of the year. Because we all know that the balance sheet is just a photo of a company at any given point in time. So it's a static. But in order to make it dynamic for you, you have to live every single day if that was your entire fiscal year. And you will pay a lot more attention to details than otherwise you wouldn't notice, and to try and avoid some of the pitfalls. Not all of them, because as Mike said, there are way too many pitfalls to avoid all of them, but definitely at least you can avoid the mistakes that would tank your ship. So live every single day of the year as if it's all the balance sheet depended on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Giampaolo. And Sanjay, your final remark for VC investors as you addressed already the startups.
Yeah, so I think I agree, I concur with the team that passion of the entrepreneur, passion of what you believe in is very important. But I only want to say is that it has to solve a business pain point. I mean, even Josh, what you started was solving a business pain point of $300 billion worth of leakage, right? No one was there, you were passionate about it, but it was solving a business pain point and plugging a gap, right? You may not think that all your friends may have thought that you were doing something crazy, but you are not. I mean, this is going to be the future of education. How education is going to be imparted. Just watch, right? So you were solving a business pain point. I think what I want, the only message I'll say is that when I speak at business schools, and whether it's in the top business schools or medium business schools, it doesn't matter. I always said that in the digital age, the sun was setting twice a day. What I say today is that the sun is setting 4 times a day. That's it. That's the pace. What was going to happen in 2025 is happening in 2020, 2021, 2022. Don't think that this will take 4 years to go there. So go with your guts, go with your belief, be passionate what you do, but it must always solve a business point. And when the investor sees that, they invest. I've got an energy company going right now. It's hardware oriented. We are solving this, we are doing disruption in the storage solution, getting rid of CO2 emissions by 80% and reducing costs by 80%, right? On 5 kilowatt to 30 kilowatt. I know nothing about energy, but what we have done, the investors are also looking for ESG. What is environmentally friendly? What is socially right? What has got the proper governance? They're also willing to look at those elements, whether the investment they're making is going there or not. So I think the generation, and I think some of you guys are younger than me. I'm not going to say how old I am. The younger generation is more focused on investing in ESG oriented, compliant oriented capabilities, right? And if your solution fosters that, nothing like it. So I think be passionate, number one. So the investor is looking for passion, solving a pain point. Execution, strategy is crap. I always say that. But make sure you're executing and you have a roadmap to actually disrupt. That's it.
Thank you, Sanjay.
Which you have done, which most of you guys have done. Josh has done it, Yaron has done it. So.
Thank you, Sanjay. And it brings us to the end of our discussion today. So thank you all, and please join our various formats of communication, which is roadshows, panel discussions, fireside chats, and pitch competitions. And in just 15 minutes, we go to panel discussion on investments and pivots during pandemic, advertising, and digital media. So we advise you to join, and see you soon. Bye-bye.